The morning sun was just starting to peek through the trees when David realized the hardest part was still ahead of them. Lisa was stable, but they were 12 miles deep in the wilderness with no way to call for help. David's phone had died during the night from using its flashlight, and even if it worked, there was no signal this far into the mountains. David looked at Lisa, who was trying her best to stay strong despite everything she had been through. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alert and focused. He knew she was in pain, but she hadn't complained once. "Lisa, we need to get you out of here and to a real hospital," David said gently. "I'm going to have to carry you, and it's going to be a long walk. Are you ready for this?" Lisa nodded without hesitation. "I've come this far. I'm not giving up now." David spent the next hour building a stretcher, using fallen branches and rope from his backpack. He had learned basic wilderness survival skills during his military service years ago, and he was grateful for that training now. He tested the stretcher carefully to make sure it would hold Lisa's weight, then used his sleeping bag as padding to make it as comfortable as possible. Getting Lisa onto the stretcher was challenging, but they managed it together. David could see the pain in her face, but she bit her lip and stayed quiet. Her strength continued to amaze him. "Before we start walking, I need to check your bandages and make sure you're doing okay," David said, kneeling beside the stretcher. Lisa's pulse was stronger than it had been the night before, which was a good sign. The bleeding had stopped completely, and she wasn't showing signs of infection yet. David lifted the stretcher and started the long journey toward the main trail. The forest floor was uneven and covered with roots, rocks, and fallen branches. Every step was a challenge, and David had to be careful not to jar Lisa too much. He stopped every few minutes to catch his breath and check on her. "Tell me more about your photography," David said, as they slowly made their way through the trees. "How did you get started?" Lisa's face lit up a little. "My dad gave me my first camera when I was 10. We used to go on nature walks together every weekend, and he taught me to really look at the world around me. He said every moment in nature tells a story if you're patient enough to see it." David smiled as he navigated around a large boulder. "He sounds like a wise man." "He passed away 5 years ago, but I feel close to him when I'm out here taking pictures. That's actually why I was so far back in these woods. I heard there were some rare birds nesting back here that haven't been photographed in their natural habitat for over 20 years. As they walked, Lisa told David about her adventures around the world. She had photographed wildlife in Africa, climbed mountains in South America, and spent weeks in the Arctic capturing images of polar bears. Her stories made the difficult journey feel shorter and helped both of them stay focused on something positive. "What about you?" Lisa asked during one of their rest stops. "How did you become a nurse?" David adjusted his grip on the stretcher handles. "I wanted to be a doctor originally, but life had other plans. My mom got sick when I was in college, and I had to drop out to take care of her and my younger sister. By the time things settled down, I realized I loved the hands-on care that nurses provide. We're the ones who spend the most time with patients, who really get to know them as people." "Do you ever regret not becoming a doctor?" Lisa asked. David thought about it as they continued walking. "Sometimes, especially on days when I feel like I could do more to help people. But after what happened with you, I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. A doctor would have waited for proper equipment in a sterile environment. Sometimes you need someone who's willing to do whatever it takes with whatever they have." The journey was exhausting. David's shoulders ached from carrying the stretcher, and his legs felt like they were on fire. But every time he looked at Lisa and saw her determined expression, he found the strength to keep going. She never asked him to rest, even though he could see she was uncomfortable. During their second day of walking, it started to rain. David rigged up a shelter using branches and his rain jacket to keep Lisa dry. They huddled together under the makeshift cover, sharing energy bars and water from David's bottle. "I keep thinking about how different my life is going to be now," Lisa said quietly, looking down at where her leg used to be. "I've spent my whole career hiking to remote places to get the perfect shot. How am I going to do that now?" David saw the fear in her eyes for the first time since he had found her. "Lisa, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. This isn't going to stop you from doing what you love. It might change how you do it, but it won't stop you." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "Because I've seen thousands of patients over the years, and I've learned to recognize the ones who will overcome anything. You have that fire inside you. This is just another challenge for you to conquer." As they got closer to the main trail, David could see that their conversation had given Lisa hope again. She started talking about adaptive equipment she had heard about, and other photographers who had overcome disabilities. By the time they reached the trail, she was already making plans for her future. When they finally saw the parking area in the distance, David felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived one of the most challenging experiences either of them had ever faced. But more than that, they had formed a bond that would last a lifetime. The morning sun was already getting hot when David packed his backpack for what he thought would be just another peaceful weekend hike. He had been working crazy hours at the hospital for months, and his body was begging for some fresh air and quiet time in nature. The trails and the mountains were calling his name, and he couldn't wait to get away from the constant beeping of machines and the smell of cleaning supplies. David had always loved hiking alone. It gave him time to think and clear his head after long shifts in the emergency room. He had seen so much pain and suffering in his 12 years as a nurse that sometimes he wondered if he was making any real difference. But out here, surrounded by tall trees and singing birds, everything felt peaceful and right. He chose a trail he had never walked before, one that went deep into the forest where most tourists never bothered to go. The path was narrow and covered with fallen leaves, and the only sounds were his footsteps and the gentle wind through the branches. For the first time in weeks, David felt his shoulders relax and his mind slow down. About 3 hours into his hike, something made him stop. At first, he wasn't sure what it was. The forest had gone quiet, which was strange. Even the birds had stopped singing. Then he heard it again, a faint sound that didn't belong in the wilderness. It was weak and barely audible, but it sounded like someone calling for help. David stood perfectly still and listened carefully. There it was again, definitely a human voice, and it sounded desperate. His heart started beating faster as his medical training kicked in. Someone was in trouble, and they were somewhere close. He left the main trail and pushed through thick bushes following the sound. The voice was getting clearer now, and he could tell it was a woman. She was calling for help over and over, but her voice was getting weaker each time. David moved as fast as he could, branches scratching his arms and thorns catching on his clothes. The forest was dense here, and it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. But David kept following the voice, his medical instincts telling him that every second counted. He had heard that tone before in the emergency room. It was the sound of someone who was hurt badly and running out of time. After what felt like forever but was probably only 10 minutes, David broke through a thick group of bushes and saw something that made his blood run cold. A huge tree had fallen across a small clearing, and underneath it was a young woman. She was trapped from the waist down, and there was blood everywhere. The woman looked up at him with eyes full of fear and pain. She was probably in her late 20s, with long brown hair that was now dirty and matted with sweat. Her face was pale, and David could see right away that she was in shock. But what scared him the most was how much blood she had lost. The ground around her was dark red, and he could see that her leg was twisted in a way that legs shouldn't twist. "Please help me," she whispered, her voice so weak he could barely hear her. "I've been here for so long." David dropped his backpack and rushed to her side. His hands were shaking, but his training took over. He quickly checked her pulse and breathing while trying to stay calm. Her pulse was fast and weak, which meant she was losing blood fast. Her breathing was shallow and her skin felt cold and clammy. These were all signs that her body was shutting down. "What's your name?" David asked gently, kneeling beside her. "Lisa," she managed to say. "I'm a photographer. I was trying to get pictures of the rare birds that live back here. The tree just fell out of nowhere yesterday morning. I think it was the storm." David remembered the terrible storm that had hit the area 2 nights ago. The wind had been so strong that it kept him awake, and he had heard trees falling all night. Lisa had been trapped here for more than a day, which explained why she was in such bad shape. He looked around quickly and realized how serious their situation was. They were miles from the nearest road, and his phone had no signal this deep in the forest. Even if he could call for help, it would take hours for rescue teams to find them and get back here with the right equipment to move the tree. Lisa didn't have hours. From what David could see, she maybe had 1 hour before she would be beyond help. The tree that had fallen on her was massive, probably weighing several tons. There was no way David could move it by himself, and he didn't have any tools that could cut through something that big. But he knew he couldn't just leave Lisa here while he went for help. She would be gone by the time he got back. David took a deep breath and looked at Lisa's injuries more carefully. What he saw made his stomach turn, but he forced himself to stay professional. Her left leg was completely crushed under the tree, and the damage was severe. There was no way to save the leg, and if he didn't do something soon, Lisa would lose her life too. "Lisa, I need you to listen to me very carefully," David said, taking her hand. "I'm a nurse, and I've worked in emergency rooms for many years. I know this is scary, but I'm going to take care of you." Lisa nodded weakly, trusting him completely. Even though they had just met, David could see in her eyes that she knew how bad things were, but she was trying to be brave. As the sun started to get lower in the sky, David realized he was facing the biggest challenge of his career. He had to make a choice that would change both of their lives forever, and he had to make it fast. The clock was ticking, and Lisa's life was in his hands. David knelt beside Lisa and tried to think clearly while his heart pounded in his chest. He had handled countless emergencies in the hospital, but this was different. Here in the middle of nowhere, he didn't have the machines, medicines, or team of doctors that he was used to working with. All he had was his basic first aid kit and the knowledge he had gained over 12 years of nursing. He looked at Lisa's leg again and felt his stomach drop. The massive tree had completely crushed everything below her knee. There was no way to save that part of her leg, and worse, the damaged tissue was releasing toxins into her bloodstream. David knew from his medical training that this condition, called crush syndrome, could kill someone even after they were freed from what was trapping them. "Lisa, I need to be completely honest with you," David said, his voice gentle but serious. "Your leg is badly hurt, and you're losing too much blood. If we don't do something right now, you're going to die out here." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I know it's bad. I can't feel anything below my knee anymore. What can we do?" David took a deep breath. What he was about to suggest went against everything he had been taught about staying within his scope of practice. Nurses weren't supposed to perform surgery, especially not in the middle of a forest with no proper tools. But sometimes rules had to be broken to save a life. "Lisa, there's only one way I can help you right now. But it's going to be really hard to hear," David said, squeezing her hand. "I need to remove the part of your leg that's been crushed. It's the only way to stop the bleeding and get you out of here alive." Lisa stared at him for a long moment, processing what he had just said. David expected her to panic or refuse, but instead, she surprised him with her strength. "Will I live if you do it?" she asked quietly. "I believe so, yes. But Lisa, I have to tell you I'm not a surgeon. I've only seen this procedure done in the hospital. I've never done it myself, and certainly not like this." Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, and David could see her thinking it through. When she opened them again, there was determination in her gaze that hadn't been there before. "Trust you," she said firmly. "I have a little brother who's getting married next month. I have photographs I haven't shown the world yet. I have so many things I still want to do. If this is my only chance to live, then please do it." David felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. This brave woman was putting her complete faith in him, and he couldn't let her down. He opened his backpack and spread out everything he had: a small first aid kit, some rope, his pocket knife, a water bottle, and a few energy bars. It wasn't much, but David had learned to work with what he had. He cleaned his hands with some water and disinfectant from his first aid kit. Then he looked around the forest floor and found some moss and pine needles, which he knew had natural antiseptic properties. His grandmother had taught him about natural remedies when he was young, and he never thought that knowledge would save someone's life. "Lisa, this is going to hurt a lot, and I need you to stay awake and talk to me." Whole time, David explained, I need to know how you're feeling so I can make sure you're okay." He used his belt as a tourniquet above Lisa's knee, tightening it until the bleeding slowed significantly. Lisa gasped in pain, but she didn't cry out. David was amazed by her. "Courage, tell me about your photography," David said as he prepared his pocket knife. "What kind of pictures do you like to take?" Lisa started talking about her love for capturing wildlife in their natural habitat. She told him about the time she spent 3 days waiting to photograph a family of foxes, and how she once hiked 15 miles just to get a picture of a rare bird. Her voice helped both of them stay calm as David began the most challenging procedure of his life. Working by the light of his phone's flashlight, David carefully began the process. He talked Lisa through every step, explaining what he was doing and why. His hands were steady, guided by years of experience handling medical instruments, even though this was far from the sterile operating room he was used to. "You're doing great, Lisa," David said as he worked. "Keep talking to me. Tell me about your brother's wedding." Lisa described her brother's fiancé and how excited the whole family was about the wedding. She talked about the dress she had picked out and the speech she was planning to give. Her words painted pictures of a loving family and a life worth fighting for. The procedure took almost 4 hours. David had to stop several times to rest and check Lisa's condition. He gave her small sips of water and used his jacket to keep her warm as the night got colder. Throughout it all, Lisa never complained, even though David knew she was in terrible pain. When David finally finished, he bandaged the area carefully. Using supplies from his first aid kit and strips of cloth from his shirt, Lisa was weak but alert, and most importantly, the dangerous bleeding had stopped. "We did it, Lisa," David said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "You're going to be okay." Lisa smiled weakly. "Thank you for saving my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." David looked at this incredible woman who had just shown more courage than many people show in their entire lives. "You don't owe me anything. You just focus on getting better." As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, David realized that their journey was just beginning. Now he had to figure out how to get Lisa out of these mountains and to a hospital. But for the first time since he had found her, David felt hopeful. Lisa was alive, and that was what mattered most. When the rescue helicopter finally spotted David carrying Lisa on the makeshift stretcher, both of them were exhausted but alive. The paramedics were amazed at what they saw. David had managed to perform a life-saving procedure in the wilderness, and then carry Lisa 12 miles to safety. The lead paramedic, who had been doing rescue work for 15 years, said he had never seen anything like it. At the hospital, doctors were shocked by the quality of David's field work. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the chief of emergency medicine, examined Lisa's leg and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The procedure had been done so carefully and precisely that it looked like the work of an experienced surgeon, not a nurse working with a pocket knife in the dark. "This is remarkable," Dr. Coleman told David as they stood outside Lisa's room. "You saved her life, but more than that, you did it in a way that gives her the best possible chance for recovery. How did you know to do all this?" David shrugged, still feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "I just did what felt right. I couldn't let her die out there." Word of the rescue spread quickly through the hospital, and soon the local news picked up the story. Within days, the tale of the nurse who saved a photographer's life in the wilderness was being shared across the country. But what happened next surprised everyone, including David and Lisa. Dr. Catherine Wu, a leading researcher in advanced prosthetics from the State University, saw the news story and immediately drove to the hospital. She had been working on a revolutionary new type of artificial limb that could be controlled by thoughts and provide real feeling to the user. The technology was so new that she had only tested it on a few patients, but something about Lisa's story convinced her that she would be the perfect candidate. "Lisa, what David did for you was incredible. But I think we can do something incredible for you too," Dr. Wu explained during her visit. "I've been developing a prosthetic leg that's unlike anything that exists today. It connects directly to your nervous system and can feel pressure, temperature, and texture, just like a real leg." Lisa's eyes widened. She had been worried about how she would continue her photography career, especially the hiking and climbing that her work required. "Are you saying I could walk normally again? Even climb mountains?" Not just walk, Dr. Wu smiled. With this prosthetic, you might actually be stronger and more stable than you were before. The leg has sensors that can detect unstable ground and automatically adjust for better balance. It's like having superhuman stability. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with Lisa's photography. During her recovery, she had been posting pictures on her social media accounts. Not just her nature photos, but also images from her rescue and recovery. The photo of David carrying her through the forest, which another hiker had taken when they first reached the trail, had gone viral. People around the world were inspired by the story of two strangers who had faced impossible odds together. Lisa's follower count went from a few thousand to over 2 million in just 2 weeks. Major magazines were calling, wanting to feature her story and her photography. But the most surprising call came from the National Geographic Society. They wanted to offer Lisa a contract to document stories of human survival and resilience. Around the world, the editor explained that her unique perspective, as someone who had experienced both crises and recovery, would bring something special to their stories. We've been looking for a photographer who understands what it means to face the impossible and overcome it, the editor told Lisa over the phone. Your work has always been beautiful, but now it has a depth and meaning that we think could inspire millions of people. David was facing his own unexpected opportunities. Hospitals from around the country were calling, wanting to hire the nurse who had performed a miracle in the wilderness. Medical schools were asking him to speak to their students about thinking creatively under pressure. A publisher even approached him about writing a book on wilderness medicine for regular people. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The International Association of Emergency Nurses awarded David their highest honor for heroism. At the ceremony, the presenter said, David didn't just save one life that day. He showed the world what it means to use your skills and knowledge to help others, no matter the circumstances. 3 months after the rescue, Lisa was walking with her new prosthetic leg. Dr. Wu's technology worked even better than expected. Lisa could feel the ground beneath her feet, and the leg's advanced sensors helped her navigate even the most challenging terrain with confidence. David visited Lisa during her physical therapy sessions, and they both marveled at how much their lives had changed. Neither of them could have imagined that a chance encounter in the forest would lead to such incredible opportunities. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had taken a different trail that day, Lisa said as she practiced walking upstairs with her new leg. David smiled. I don't think it was chance. I think we were supposed to meet. Look at all the good that's come from it. 6 months after their rescue, David and Lisa stood at the edge of the same forest where their story had begun. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them were 30 volunteers from around the country who had come to participate in the first ever Wilderness Life Skills Workshop. What had started as a personal experience between two people had grown into something much bigger. And David had realized that there were thousands of people who loved spending time in nature, but had no idea what to do in an emergency. They decided to do something about it. When Lisa and I were out there, I wished I had better equipment and more training, David told the group of eager students. But I also realized that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have the right knowledge and the courage to act. The workshop they created was unlike anything that existed before. It combined David's medical expertise with Lisa's knowledge of wilderness, survival, and photography. Students learned basic life-saving techniques, how to improvise medical equipment from everyday items, and how to document their experiences for others to learn from. Lisa, now completely comfortable with her prosthetic leg, demonstrated how to navigate difficult terrain and set up emergency shelters. Her new leg actually gave her advantages she never had before. It never got tired, never got cold, and the sensors helped her detect unstable ground that might be dangerous for others. I used to think my disability would end my career, Lisa told the group as she easily climbed over a fallen log. Instead, it opened up possibilities I never imagined. The workshops were so successful that they started getting requests from around the world. Within a year, David and Lisa were traveling to 6 different countries, teaching their life-saving techniques to everyone from scout troops to professional mountain guides. Their story had inspired something called the Wilderness Angels movement. People everywhere were taking courses in basic emergency medicine and carrying better first aid supplies when they went hiking or camping. The number of successful wilderness rescues by ordinary hikers increased by 300% in just 1 year. Major outdoor equipment companies started partnering with David and Lisa to develop better emergency supplies for hikers. They created lightweight surgical kits, emergency communication devices, even a smartphone app that could guide people through medical procedures when they had no signal to call for help. Lisa's photography career had exploded beyond her wildest dreams. Her book, Through Different Eyes, which documented people overcoming disabilities around the world, became a bestseller. She had photographed Paralympic athletes, veterans adjusting to life after injury, and children with disabilities pursuing their dreams. But the project she was most proud of was her series on everyday heroes, ordinary people, who had used their skills to help others in crisis situations. The series featured teachers who had saved students during natural disasters, mechanics who had rescued people from car accidents, and even children who had helped their families during emergencies. David's life had changed just as dramatically. He had left his hospital job to focus full-time on wilderness medicine education. Medical schools across the country now required students to take his course on improvised emergency care. He had also started working with emergency response teams to develop new techniques for rescuing people in remote locations. The most amazing development was the research that grew out of their work. David's field techniques had been studied and refined by medical experts, leading to new standard procedures for emergency medicine in resource-limited settings. His methods were now being used to train medical personnel for disaster response and military field medicine. 2 years after their first meeting in the forest, David and Lisa stood before the United Nations World Health Assembly. They had been invited to speak about how ordinary people could be trained to save lives in emergency situations around the world. What we learned is that heroism isn't about having special powers or perfect conditions, Lisa told the assembly. It's about ordinary people deciding to use whatever skills they have to help others, even when the situation seems impossible. David added, every person has the potential to save a life. They just need the knowledge, the two,